Okay. I'm Magdalena. I'm an academic coordinator here at Global Language Training. We invited you to this webinar because of, I guess, the current situation in China and, well, trying to propose to you some new opportunities, new teaching opportunities that you can have for yourself. So we're going to talk about teaching TOEFL and IELTS, which is a very complicated thing when you think about it. But I'm going to try to make it a bit easier for you and give you some tips and hacks. Here is the agenda. We're going to discuss the TOEFL and IELTS structure. We're going to go first with TOEFL, then move to IELTS. I will show you how to teach both of these exams. And at the end, I'm going to tell you a bit more about other options or option. Also, you will be able to ask questions. If you have any questions at the end, I'm going to give you that option. So please feel free to ask anything, okay? As I mentioned, well, there's this new law in China, and many people lost their jobs because of that. So let's see what else we can do, okay? What else we can do to stand out from the crowd and maybe get better jobs and better paid jobs, because TOEFL and IELTS are those jobs that, well, they're gonna help you get a bit more money. TOEFL, you probably know, this is an acronym for Test of English as a Foreign Language. It's an American exam. It tests the ability to understand and use the English language in an academic environment. Some important things about this exam is that the test results of this exam are only valid for 2 years. And another important fact is that this test can be taken on the computer. It's called TOEFL IBT exam, which comes from internet-based test. It's an abbreviation. So it's probably why this exam is so popular around the world. And just so you know, the information I'm giving you in this webinar is going to mainly refer to the computer form of this exam. Now, the TOEFL structure, all 4 parts are taken on the same day. This is reading, listening, speaking, and writing. The test itself lasts up to 4 hours, so it's worth getting used to the demanding form that it is and the huge number of tasks. It's approximately 80-90 tasks per sheet. And in total, for the entire exam, the candidate, the test taker, may receive a maximum of 120 points, with 30 points for each part. Also, this is for you to know if you start teaching TOEFL or IELTS. Well, students can have like a little white paper on which they can take notes. This is important to know, especially for your students. So let's take a look at the scores. Now, we're going to start with reading. This part lasts from 1 hour to 1 hour 40 minutes. You get between 3 to 5 long texts, and each text has got 14 questions, and between 4 and 6 lectures, and then 6 questions for each lecture. The texts are very similar to the ones that are contained in academic textbooks. So they are dealing with many scientific fields. So some specialized vocabulary may appear in the tasks, but the general knowledge is sufficient to understand the question and to answer it correctly. You don't always have to know all the scientific vocabulary. The test takers have 20 minutes to solve individual tasks for each text, and then they receive the next text with a set of tasks. So it's impossible to read all the texts at once. It all goes gradually. They must answer the questions asked about the main idea and purpose of the text, the character of the text, and the vocabulary it contains. and also some individual functions of the texts. Your students, they must be able to draw conclusions from what they read. They have to know how to paraphrase and how to complete the texts with sentences that fit the contexts. There are new types of questions. They also require examiners to paraphrase sentences and also complete tables. Sometimes it happens that they have to even write summaries. And then we have listening. This one lasts between 1 hour to 1 hour 30 minutes. You have between 2 or 3 student interviews and 5 questions related to each dialogue, and from 4 to 6 academic lectures or discussions. These are of a scientific nature, and then you get 6 questions related to the lecture that you heard. So obviously, the test takers must provide correct answers to the questions. And the number of questions in that part is between 34 to around 50, depending on the exam. All the recordings during listening, they are played once. So this makes it very difficult. And that's why it's important to get to know the questions before the listening. Students will have some time for that. They will have around 1.5 minutes to get familiarized with the questions, so they can then, during the listening, catch the most important things from those audios. Okay. Now, the speaking. This is around 20 minutes, so it's very short. Your students are gonna get 2 independent tasks and 4 integrated. How it looks like. In the first 2 tasks, students will have to answer questions about many aspects of academic life. The answers can be formulated in a free way, just as you would speak to your friend. It's about your knowledge about daily life, about your experience in life, about what you like, what you don't like. So this one is more like a conversation with a friend. And then in the integrated tasks, the candidates will have to read the text and then listen to the recording and then answer what is the relationship between the text and the one they heard. So in the last 2 integrated tasks, students have to listen to long texts and then summarize them and express their opinion on the topics contained in them. And then we will move on to writing, which is quite long, around 50 minutes, well, maximum 50 minutes. You get 1 integrated and 1 independent task. In the first one, the integrated one, you get the short text. You have to read that text and then hear the recording related to the content of the text. And then you give a written answer to the question asked. Usually, you have to compare something, okay? So you will have 20 minutes to write an essay of between 150 and 220 words. This is the thing with TOEFL, the skills are integrated. So you don't just get, okay, write about this topic and that's it. No, they integrate the skills, and I will tell you a bit more about it later during the webinar. And then you have the second task. Here you write a short essay. You will have around 30 minutes. This one is a bit more complicated, so you get 30 minutes to write that. And you have to express the opinion on the topic. This is up to 300 words long. So in total, it's more or less 450, 500 something words for the writing part. And now the juice of the webinar. I'm gonna tell you a bit about how to teach TOEFL. Because in general, teachers are stressed out when they think about teaching TOEFL. And they have a good reason for that, because I guess the most stressful thing about TOEFL is that when you want to teach it, you Google it, how to teach TOEFL, and you get those huge textbooks, 300 pages long. They give you all the tips, tell you how to teach TOEFL, and it's just overwhelming. But to be honest, teaching TOEFL is like teaching anything else, really. But you will have to mostly emphasize the structure of the exam and deal with integrated activities, as I mentioned. You will have to use different skills with your students, like mentioned, spoken response to a reading passage, followed by a listening passage. But no matter what, if you prepare a bit and you get some guidance, you will be able to become a good TOEFL teacher. So number one, the orange part that you can see here, the preparation. This is the very first step. In the first class, once you meet your students, you will have to give them a feel for what they're trying to do. So a practice test is a good idea to start, because that's going to set the tone for the whole course. And it's going to show them that TOEFL is not an easy test. So you should tell them that learning TOEFL is not going to be easy, that they will have to put a lot of effort, a lot of work to get the score that they need or that they want, because obviously many of these people want to apply at some universities, or they need it for to get a job. And an important thing to mention here is that if you feel like some student has very low English level, you have to be very honest with them. You have to tell them that, well, maybe you should study a bit more. Maybe you should go to a level that is good for you, maybe lower level, because if they don't, they're gonna get very demotivated, and that's not good. So remember to be very honest with them about their level, so they don't lie to themselves and they don't get demotivated for the future. And the blue part that you can see, planning lessons, it's very beneficial if you plan lessons backwards. What that means, you have to work from the aims. So you set the aims first, the objectives, obviously, and then you work backwards. So based on the aims of what you want to achieve, you then have to think of the activities that you're going to do with your students in class. Okay. Now, knowing the drill, obviously, you should not be teaching TOEFL if you've never taken a test. So it's a very good idea to take even the practice TOEFL test. It doesn't mean that you have to pay for the test and take it. No, because there are so many practice tests that you can take. So just take a demo. It's gonna give you some understanding how the test is structured, and you're gonna learn the different steps that are involved in the test itself. So you should do it regularly. You cannot just take it once and be like, yeah, I took that test and I'm done. No, it's a good idea to take it a few times to know what you're talking about to your students. The pink part, the recording. Maybe some students are not going to be very comfortable with recording their voice. When they take the computer version of TOEFL, if they didn't practice that before, they may get very, very creeped out. So the idea for you is to go to class and ask them to record themselves. It's not like you have to take your phone and put it next to their mouth and force them to record something. No, if they don't feel comfortable with that, give them some time. Give them a little bit of space in the classroom, and they can quietly record something, listen to it, listen to themselves, see how they sound, see if they're including every detail that they're supposed to mention in the recording, and it's going to help them very much when they take the real exam. It's all, I think, psychological. It's more psychological, so they don't stress out about technicalities. And the note taking, I think that many teachers forget how note taking is important. It's not just for the exams, but in any lesson. Questions, for example, in the listening, they don't allow students to answer them as they hear them, but encourage your students to take notes. So when the questions appear on the screen after the passage, students are going to have time to take notes. When you sit down with your students in the classroom, try to make them organize information. Obviously, they will not have time to write full sentences, but they can make bullet points, okay? Play them some listening and make them write bullet points, read it out loud with them, and compare between students what they wrote, and then give them tips. If maybe bullet points are still too long, maybe they should remove some words, okay? They just have to write down a quick idea of what just appeared on the screen. Now, integrating skills, as I mentioned before. In general, as you know, the English language is broken down into 4 parts: the speaking, reading, writing, and listening. And as I said, the TOEFL is pretty unique because it forces students to use multiple skills when answering a single question. It also involves effective note-taking, as we said. So the very unfortunate part of the integrated components is if your students are weak in one area, their score, the overall score, is going to be lower. So to teach integrated tasks effectively, you will have to start simple. So you can introduce students to the integrated task is, for example, you can give them news articles to read. You can make them watch TV news after that. But obviously they have to be on the same subject. So you give them an article, then they watch some TV news about it, and then you get them used to their notes to give a quick talk about it. So they have to quickly compare the ideas that they heard. And it's gonna get them familiarized with the test itself. It's very probable that students have never done such thing. So if you start like this, this is gonna be a big improvement right away. The structure, the yellow part that you can see, it's not, obviously none of these exams are just about English skills, but it's also about the structure, and they have to be aware of that. So for example, in terms of the TOEFL writing, they must know that they have to include all the essential details that an examiner looks for, like thesis statement, topic sentences, and supporting sentences. So structure is key. It's very important. And the time management, the blue part. It doesn't matter if it's reading, writing, speaking, listening, all of those are bound by time restrictions. So after students know the structure of the test, they should then focus on getting the structural requirements within the time limits. If they can't finish the tasks within the required period of time, then this is something that you have to begin to focus on to give your students better chances to achieve the goals they're looking for. Now, let's move on to IELTS exam. I'm not sure how much you know about that. This is obviously a huge exam. It's present in 150 countries. It has more than 2.5 million annual test takers. And it's definitely the most popular English test for higher education and immigration. It's obviously widely accepted, and it has more than 9,000 educational and government institutions that accept those IELTS results. When you think about these numbers, you can just imagine how good the career options are. So if you want to be an IELTS teacher, you can start from teaching online. There are many different institutions that will allow you to sign up to the website, get students, and teach IELTS. I don't know if you heard, for example, you have a website called Preply. You can teach general English there. You can prep students for the exams. You can teach business English, whatever you want really, and whatever your students need. So having proper training in IELTS or TOEFL is gonna give you more options. And the pay scale is also different. It's usually it exceeds the average income in a country. So the potential to earn money with this is pretty high. And maybe if you want to travel, if you love to travel, you will definitely enjoy some mobility. You get an online job, you go somewhere else, and you teach IELTS or TOEFL. So I think that's pretty great. So let's look at the format of IELTS. You have two different versions. You have academic IELTS and you have general training. The academic one is for people who want to study in English-speaking countries at the undergraduate or postgraduate level, or maybe work in some place where academic English is required. And the general training is for people who want to migrate to the English-speaking countries, maybe for school. It's not for the university, but let's say for the school. And what they focus on is assessing survival skills. So let's say how you talk to people on the street, how you do your shopping, how you go to the doctor, okay? And most people take IELTS academic to study or work overseas because many places are asking for it. They're asking to have a proof of your language proficiency. And the next one, so how much time do we have? It's a bit different than TOEFL. You have listening here, it's 30 minutes. Students are obviously required to hear some recordings of English speakers, they're native English speakers, and you'll have to answer the questions. Reading, it's 1 hour. It includes reading of long texts and answering questions based on understanding. Then you have speaking, it's 14 minutes. It's done in person. The examiner is gonna ask you anything about work, family, or activities that the test taker enjoys. And the writing, 60 minutes. There are 2 writing assignments, and students in those assignments, they have to demonstrate their thoughts and opinions. When you read a little bit about this exam, you'll see that IELTS is not really a pass or fail exam. Each section is going to be scored separately from 0 to 9. 0 would mean that the student is a beginner, and the 9 would indicate that the student is fluent. And then you get the overall performance score. How to start with IELTS? Now, to prepare to teach the material, once again, you should familiarize yourself with the test, just like with TOEFL. You need to know what you're talking about. And it's also important that you give your students some tests that they have to solve so they see for themselves how it looks like and how it feels like. Also, you might have students with different ability levels. Some of them would be beginners, and some of them would have already tested before, but they need to improve their results. So before you begin with your students, it obviously makes sense to receive their test scores and break students into groups depending on their level. And as I said, for those who have never tested, and if you want, you can do it for everybody, give them a test, see what they can do, see what they cannot do, and you will know where to move on from that. We're gonna start with IELTS listening. You have here 4 different types. Listening is the first portion of the test, and it's listening to the audio recordings of conversations or speeches, and then answering questions about what was being talked about in these audios. So 30 minutes, which involves general conversation, general speech, academic conversation, or academic talk, okay? Each one of the stages is about 5 minutes long. Students need to answer 10 questions about each recording. So the questions could be in different formats. It could be multiple choice, it could be fill in the blanks, or fill out the answers on the diagram. And at the end of the test, this is important info, students have extra time to go back and fill in any answers they missed because of the time constraints while listening to the recordings. How to prepare your students for IELTS listening. Okay, so let's start with accents. You get a variety of accents on that exam. You can have British, American, New Zealand, Australian speakers, and many more. This is just a few examples. So the speech is different, and it's very difficult for students who don't really have real world exposure to the English language. They don't really hear people speaking English on the street. Maybe they don't even watch any English shows. So they are kind of in a bubble in their countries, and they have no option to practice. They have no option to listen. So it's an important role for you to play, because you don't only help your students with the accents, but you also have to keep them motivated. Some students, if they don't understand something, they easily give up. So you gotta be careful and try to keep them motivated. This is also about students who are anxious. They're always preoccupied with something. Everything kills their confidence. They're gonna start thinking, what if I fail? What if my score is low? Am I gonna make it or not? I really need that result to be good. And they just waste their time and energy on that worrying. So you'll have to teach them to listen. You have to teach them to stay focused. And how you can help them? Well, you can play recordings from different geographic locations, because accents can be very difficult. It's very important that students become acquainted, familiarized with many accents, as many as possible. So play different recordings and emphasize where the same word is pronounced differently in different accents. So that way they can know what's going on. Also help them with the sounds and spellings and contexts, because in English there are many words that have the same sound, different spellings, or same spellings, different meanings, or same spellings, different sounds. You'll have to help your students go through this and help them differentiate all of that. Now the monologues and dialogues. We have 4 recordings, 2 conversation types, monologues and dialogues with different difficulty levels. The difficulty is increasing. The accents, once again, they can be different. So each recording has different challenges to the test taker, to your student. So it's easy to keep attention when listening to a conversation, but the monologues, they can be a bit difficult. They can be stuffy, they can be boring. So yeah, conversation is always easier to listen to, but the monologues are not. So it's a good idea to give your students a few more monologues to listen to, so they stay focused, so they learn how to stay focused. You can start by testing your students for both types of recordings. It's very important to understand where students make mistakes and how you can correct them. So, well, in 21st century, people are not very active listeners. We are very distracted by technology. So we gotta get back there and make your students be more active listeners. For example, since the monologues are a little bit boring, you should make your students take notes. Okay, they take notes during the listening, and then they take the answer that they think is correct, and after that you check in your classroom what answers they got. And the important part here is to ask them why. It's very important because students tend to get distracted and they hear some word in the recording and then they just they assume the answer without listening to the end of the recording. So always ask them why they believe the answer, that answer is correct, the one that they ticked. So they can notice where they are getting wrong answers and why. So they have to get some conscious learning there. And teach to skim information. Skimming is a reading technique. This is about reading fast. So the reader, for example, he picks the keywords, big ideas, occasions, dates through a piece of text. The point is to not go into details. It's about getting general idea. So you can apply the same technique when you take the listening test. This is obviously skimming is more for reading, but it applies to listening as well. So students can look at the questions ahead of the recording. There is like a gap that I mentioned before of around 1 minute and 30 seconds between the recordings. So students can skim the questions and pinpoint the essential information in the clips. So you will have to walk your students through it. So for example, you can tell them they have to know the questions before the recording is played. They can look for keywords and phrases. They should focus on details like days, years, events, whatever was mentioned in the questions. They will also have to try and remember the names and try to catch the big idea. Okay, but this is not going to happen if they don't know the questions in advance. So it's very important that they read the questions first very fast. How to teach IELTS reading. So this section is about reading comprehension and answering a big set of questions, just like any standardized test. So there are 3 passages and 40 questions, and it's supposed to assess the ability of the test taker to identify the arguments, the opinions, and the purpose of the text. Those passages that they will have to read, they can be from anywhere. Can be newspapers, can be textbooks or magazines. They can also be written in different styles. So you can get a narrative, descriptive, you can get something factual, or even argumentative. And the questions, once again, they can be multiple choice, fill in the blank, you can get true or false, and you can get summarizing. So the passages are not the same in length, and there may not be the same number of questions devoted to each section. So it's a big mix. You're not really sure what's going to happen. So it's important that the students learn how to manage their time so they have more confidence in completing each section. How would you teach IELTS reading? So when you start to train your students, the first thing you can do is, well, you have to make it feel less overwhelming for them. Reading comprehension needs a lot of practice. We've been learning reading comprehension since we were kids, right? Since we were little, since we were in kindergarten. So this is not a skill you can learn, in one class. It takes a lot of time and effort. But you can make it a bit less challenging and a bit more rewarding at the same time by breaking the skills into sub-skills, helping your students take small steps. And well, in the end, they will achieve the bigger goal. So small steps, bigger goal. This sounds very psychological. But apart from psychological part of it, there's also a technical part. So I want to give you a few tips that you can consider when you work with the students to improve the score. Once again, you see skimming and scanning. I mentioned already one of them, but let's go through that. I think it's one of the most important skills that you can learn in life. And students usually, it's your second language. Very often it's the second language of the students, and they cannot read very fast. A typical person, typical adult, is gonna read probably between 200, 300 words in a minute. But you can train your students to read much faster, even up to 300% faster. And it sounds surreal, but it is possible exactly thanks to skimming and scanning. Okay. So the idea is to read more in less time, and just to understand faster, you have to reduce the fixation time, the fixation of your eyes on the text. You basically jump from one information to another. You know what you're looking for. So as I said before, knowing the questions is crucial. You see the questions, read the text very fast, and they know what's going on. So I think I mentioned skimming already, and scanning as well, because I mentioned to you about something about looking up for specific dates, events, names, etc. So it's better if I focus now on comprehension skills. They will have to know how to read between the lines. Comprehension is sometimes about reading between the lines. And the reason why this skill is on the test is because, we need to know how to judge the students' understanding. Students have to be able to identify what the main idea is, and they have to know if what they're reading is a fact or opinion. They should also be able to draw inferences from the material, and they have to come up with conclusions, everything based on what they read. So how you can help them? For example, you can choose a text during the class. They read it, and you ask them to highlight the phrases and portions of the text they think that are crucial, information. Obviously, the highlighted parts are going to be different for different students. So yeah, don't be surprised if every student has a completely different idea of what's crucial information in the text, and that's okay, because you're going to talk about it later and ask them why they highlighted each part. Also, you can start discussions in your class. You can pick some important and not so important topics. And you have to ask your student to support their arguments. So for example, you can tell them cats are better than dogs, and they will just have to support their argument, why they think cats are better than dogs or why they disagree with this. So this is a great exercise because they can just practice how to support their opinion. Also, the exercise that I mentioned about highlighting, you can be also the one in the classroom who highlights some parts of the text. And then you also explain to them why you chose those parts, because, well, obviously you know the answers, and that way you can help them and show them why these parts are important. Okay, you have to you have to give them very good arguments. And the time management, well, the reading section is 40 questions. It may seem like a lot of material to cover in a short period. So what can we do? You can, for example, students are going to see the questions and they will get the clue about what to look for. So you can use the timer in the classroom. You can give them exactly 1.5 minutes for some questions, and then they will have to read the text. You cannot exceed the time. This is very important. Never give them more time, because they will not feel what is 1.5 minutes when they finally present the real exam. Also, what you can do, you can teach them that they have to answer the easiest questions first. So let them skip the questions they don't know the answers to. They can move forward, respond to the questions they can respond to, and then they can go back to the more challenging questions if the time allows. But the idea is to answer as many questions as they can in the time that they have. Okay, so yeah, it's a good idea to start with the simple questions first. Writing. How would you teach IELTS writing? Well, it includes 2 assignments, with the first one asking them to explain the information presented in a chart, table, or graph, and describe how something works. And the second assessment is an essay. This is expecting test takers to give their opinion or to write persuasively about a given social or economic issue. It's highly recommended to use formal English language when answering both of those assignments. How the students are going to be assessed for what they wrote. There are 4 elements. There's task completion, grammar and spelling, coherent thought, and overall response. They should understand what's going to impact the score, because it's going to help them prepare for the test and in the end submit good essays. So the examiner is going to mark this obviously manually. He's going to use the scale from 0 to 9, depending on the criteria you can see here. So task completion, this is important. It's important to attempt and complete both the tasks to score well. So your students should spend no more than 20 minutes on the first activity, which is interpreting a graph or table. And the second activity is more exhaustive, so it needs a bigger portion of the time that they have. Now, the second one is grammar and spelling. So the examiner is going to look like, he's going to look at the accuracy of the grammar. He's going to obviously look at the spelling. He's going to look at the complexity of the language, vocabulary, and the sentence structure. And the third one, coherent thought. So the examiner is going to think if the essay makes sense or not. He's going to try to determine if the ideas are cohesive, if the sentences support the main theme, and if the paragraphs are well organized. And well, it's based on the fluency and sequencing of facts, information, and ideas. And number 4, this is overall response. So did the student actually answer the question? The instructor is gonna score depending on if the student fully delved into the subject matter or not. Did they give the full response or did they miss something? Also, if they offered an opinion that's easy to understand, or maybe there was a lack of ideas in the whole essay. So you have to tell your students exactly what the assessment criteria are. You can also look for the rubric online and see how the IELTS rubric looks like. That's going to help you with testing your students, but also they're going to understand what's expected from them. How would you teach IELTS writing? So there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind. Obviously, the structure. So test takers are expected to present ideas cohesively, because that's going to show the level of the language they have, the feeling of the language they have, and their style. You need to introduce your students to different writing forms and different writing conventions. For example, each piece of writing should at least cover what, how, why, when, and where. Each paragraph should have a central theme or idea. And when the students need to move on to the next idea, it's going to mean this is a new paragraph. This is more or less the structure of the essay. What you need to teach your students? Well, writing an appropriate headline, incorporating writing conventions, joining sentences, connecting to ideas, writing complex. And to remember that IELTS examiners give considerable weight to long, complex sentences. Okay, so students need to know how to use conjunctions, different clauses, and pronouns. This gotta be a bit more complex. They cannot just write simple sentences and be happy with it. No, you have to show them more complex sentences, and that's gonna make the examiner happy, definitely. Number 2, writing skills. Students should know how to write enough. Very often, students are trying to come up with the ideas on what to write, what else should I include, and this needs a lot of practice. But there are some tricks you can pass on to your students. For example, you can tell them how to break the write-up into different segments, like thesis, background, main idea, summary, and prediction. You can talk about contextual writing, because context is key. Your students have to be able to explain circumstances or draw inferences and connect different ideas to show the bigger picture. Number 3 here, teach paragraphing. The opening paragraph has to state the thesis or idea. Students very often have trouble with that, with stating the thesis. They include it, they put it somewhere else instead of at the beginning. So emphasize really that they have to put it right there at the very beginning. And then in the next sections, they have to back up this idea with facts, opinions, or thoughts. And then at the end, the final paragraph is going to be a conclusion of the whole essay. Now, proofing skills. This is not very much supported by the schools. Usually, in schools or anywhere else where you work, in some institutions, there is a set up curriculum and you just have to run and run and run. You don't have time to stop with your students, think about what they did, edit, proofread, change something, rewrite it, give it back, get feedback, write it again. There is really no time. But when it comes to those exams, this is what we have to have time for, the proofing. So, even the native speakers, even they have to proofread what they wrote. And it's probably more important, obviously, for students taking the IELTS, because you don't get another chance. You submit the essay, you're done. So it's important to have those few minutes to go through the text again and see what was wrong. So you have to give your students time and help them, give them feedback all the time. Speaking. This one is done in person. It has 3 parts. Each one lasts between 4 or 5 minutes. The first portion, this one includes some fundamental questions about home, family, education, interests. And the second part, this is about speaking, this is about speaking abilities of the test takers. They're asked to speak on a given topic for 2 minutes, which is not very easy because you don't have a lot of time to prepare yourself. So they give you the topic and they ask you to speak about it. We don't really do that every day, do we? Even when we talk to our friends, it's not like that. We give 1 sentence, our friend gives 2 sentences, and that's how the conversation goes. But giving a speech on the topic that actually surprised us, this is something that is very difficult. So the students obviously are going to need a lot of practice with that. As I said, it's hard to come up with a good speech without having proper time to prepare. So what can you do? You can have them practice talking about themselves. The first question is often difficult. Students don't know what information is relevant to the question, and they may answer too little, not enough. So it's important to be descriptive. They cannot just say yes, no, or yes, I like it. No, I don't like it. Okay, the good thing about it is that students don't have to be very academic. They don't have to use a lot of difficult words. No, it has to be a bit more relaxed. It's more about being able to speak for longer time, not just for 5 seconds. Teachers, students have to give details. Ask them additional questions. If you feel like their answer was not enough, ask them. Try to get more information from them. Like, why? Why do you think so? What else can you tell me? Oh, I think I didn't get enough details. Please tell me more. So they're going to get a bit more comfortable with speaking at some point. Number 2, help eliminate empty words. Many people use filler words when they try to move from one idea to another, just to express what they have on their minds. You have to work with your students to remove those words or sounds, just to help them speak more coherently. You'll have to point out when they're humming or adding extra words that they simply don't need in a sentence. That happens very often when students don't have enough vocabulary to express their ideas, and then they use those filler words or sounds. So always point out when they do that until they get conscious about it, and in the end they're gonna stop themselves from making the sounds or adding words. Number 3, routine discussion. If you want them to improve the speaking skills, as I said many times, practice, practice, practice. So set up discussions, schedule them so they know when the discussions are going to happen. You can give them examples of vocabulary. You can give them the topic they're going to talk about. And when they go home, they may read about that topic. They can search for some vocabulary that they may need in certain topics. And yeah, set up the schedule You can record the results. You don't have to. They can record the results. And that's going to help you to know what else they need before the test comes. Now, you can use the previous year's tests because questions repeat. So it's the best if you go through the recent exams, you look at the question types, and actually the speaking part, this one is the one that has the best chances to get the same questions as before. So, well, I hope that your students will achieve great proficiency with lots of practice. And, well, as a teacher, you'll be able to put them on the path that allows them to reach their goals of studying and maybe living in the country of their choice. So, yeah, teaching IELTS and TOEFL, they can be a rewarding career path, both when it comes to financial aspects, also emotional aspects. So I hope that you will get exactly what you want. And the last thing I wanted to mention is, well, there is a sweet alternative to both TOEFL and IELTS. These are GEP exams. They're also accredited. They're internationally accepted. These exams are created for all ages, including young learners. They cover 5 skills: speaking, writing, listening, reading, and language use, which is the knowledge of grammar. And the test takers can present them online or in on-site centers. They are around the world. You can check on the website itestenglish.com. Just check it out if you're interested. And I hope that you enjoyed the webinar. And, well, now it's your time. Would you like to ask me something? Feel free to type your questions in the chat. I'll answer them as best as I can. So please let me know if you would like to ask me something. Okay, this is a very good question. Okay, when it comes to spelling and proper word usage, what I found the most useful with my students is reading. Okay, there is something called graded readers. I don't know if you heard of that. These are the books or stories that are rewritten. For example, let's take, I don't know, which book can we take? Maybe, I don't know, whatever book you have from Shakespeare. Okay, so there are the authors that are rewriting those books in different CEFR levels. So you can get any Shakespeare's book written in B1 level, for example. So if your students are aiming at, I don't know, B2, C1, whatever they are aiming at, you should find graded readers for them. Okay, this is going to help them with vocabulary, with spelling. They're not going to get demotivated because, you know, they're not going to be reading an original text from Shakespeare. They're going to be reading something that they understand. Okay, when you give any book to your students, they have to understand the book. It cannot be too easy and it cannot be too challenging. So if you say that the student needs to have 7 or higher, yeah, find a book that is going to help that person achieve that. Just a little bit more challenging that their level is at the moment. As a teacher, you probably have a feel of what their level is, so you can help them like this. If a student doesn't finish a section in TOEFL, do they fail the test? It's not really about failing any of the tests. You get the points in the end. Let's say, okay, between, if I remember well, 118 and 120, that's C2 level. Well, if you miss the section, you lose all the points from that section, that doesn't mean you are failing. That just means that your overall score is going to be much, much lower than it should be. I've come across two opposite opinions that the phrase like this essay is going to address the topic and explain how to do. Okay. Are you talking about starting the essay with this essay is going to address the topic? Is that what you're saying, that this should be avoided? In my opinion, yes, any of the empty phrases should always be avoided. You get straight to the point. You just give your opinion as it is. You don't have to prepare the reader for this essay is going to address. Obviously, it's going to address the topic that was given to the person who is taking the exam. So yeah, empty phrases and empty sentences should always be avoided. That is my opinion. Okay. If there are no more questions, well, thank you very much for being here. I'm leaving this email here. If you want to ask something, if you have some comments, please let me know. This is my email here, so write to me if you want to. Thank you very much for being here. I hope you have a great day or afternoon. And that is it. Hope you enjoyed it. You too, have a nice weekend. Thank you.